Stand. Morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of Finance Committee to order, and I'm asking Mr. Anthony Eaton if he would please lead us in prayer.
All-powerful, most wonderful Heavenly Father, through your precious Son Jesus, we now come into your holy presence. We come before you for guidance as we enter into the deliberations of Finance Committee. We ask for what Solomon of old asked for, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding from above. I ask that as we do the deliberations of this very important aspect, the governance of these islands, that we have patience, understanding, and respect for our colleagues and for those who are here to testify today. We ask for your guidance at all times, and that which we do will always be done for the honor and glory of your name. We pray for all of those here, their families, give them health and protection. And as you commanded us all, I pray for peace in Jerusalem. May we be guided at all times by your hand and your angels. In Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Please be seated. The House is now in Finance Committee mode. The purpose of the Finance Committee meeting is to consider the items shown in the schedule to the appropriation bill for 2014-2015 fiscal year. The schedule to the bill is consistent with pages 299 to 313 of the annual plan and estimates. The committee is in session in accordance with Standing Orders 63, subsection 3, and 75, subsection 1. The quorum of Finance Committee is 10 members, excluding the chairman. Given that the government must conclude Finance Committee's proceedings, Finance Committee's report must be presented to the House. The House also has to consider the third reading of the bill. The administrative work by the LA staff must occur to prepare the bill for assent by the Governor, Her Excellency. The bill has to be assented to by the Governor, and the appropriation law has to be gazetted by midnight of the 30th of June, 2014, so that there is an appropriation law in place for the 1st of July, 2014, for the start of the new fiscal year. Therefore, I ask for members' cooperation in asking their questions promptly and not making long preambles to their questions. Members will wish to explain why they're asking questions, but each explanation needs to be kept brief. Proceedings in Finance Committee do not afford members on either side of the House an opportunity to debate all over again. We undoubtedly will have to work beyond 5 p.m. on many days, and I'll do my best to let members know exactly, or as early as possible, how long we will work for the day, and as also when we will take our lunch breaks. I believe in predictability and consistency, and I think given the fact that we are here for the length of time that we will be here, many people will have to conduct their business over lunch, given that after 7 p.m. when we are out of here, many businesses are closed. So hence the reason why I want people to know and be able to predict as to when they should be able to take their lunch break. In accordance with Standing Order subsection 4, in accordance with Standing Order 64 subsection 3, I shall ask members for a particular item, members' approval for a particular item by posing the question. All those in favor of, and I shall state the name of the particular appropriation and its amount. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye, and those against, no. Once all the appropriations in the schedule to the bill have been considered and voted upon by the committee, there are some additional closing procedural considerations that the committee also needs to vote on, such as Standing Order 64, subsection 4, which seeks a decision from the committee as to whether the schedule to the bill stands part of the bill. Standing Order 64, subsection 5, requires the committee to determine whether the clauses in the bill do stand part of the bill. And Standing Order 64, subsection 7, requires the committee to vote on the question as to whether the bill is reported to the House. Finance Committee deliberations will continue until all appropriations in the schedules of the bill have been voted upon by the committee. This could take a week or more. For each item or a group of items called out by the chairman, committee members will vote in accordance with Standing Order 64, and that is whether or not the appropriation item or group of items form part of the schedule to the bill. The above procedure is done systematically as each ministry, portfolio, or office is reviewed, and once this procedure is completed, this establishes that the committee is satisfied that the appropriation listed in the schedule to the bill should indeed be on the schedule to the bill. I will now take a few minutes to review the financial results and position for the year ending 30th June 2015. Net surplus. The Statement of Financial Performance on page 319 of the Annual Plan and Estimates document indicates the following with respect to the year ending 30th June 2015. Core government's budgeted revenues of $657.7 million. Total core government's operating and financing costs of $536.8 million. Core government's net surplus of $120.9 million. The net surplus arising from statutory authorities and government-owned companies of $7.1 million, and the entire public sector is expected to have a net surplus of $128 million. With respect to the balance sheet or the schedule of assets and liabilities, as it is titled on page 318 of the Annual Plan and Estimates document, has a few notable matters. The net worth of core government, that is, the assets less its liabilities, is approximately $1.6 billion. This significant figure reflects the fact that with an effective valuation date of 1 July 2012, certain of government's fixed assets were revalued as required by international public sector accounting standards, and the result of this revaluation was a significant increase in the value of government's fixed assets. This obviously would cause an increase in government's net worth. The actuarial valuation deficiency of $178.3 million with respect to the 3 public sector pension plans has been included on the face of the balance sheet, and this figure represents the latest valuation report, an effective date of 1 January 2011, conducted by the Public Sector Pensions Board Actuary. As the valuations are required to be conducted every 3 years, the next valuation will have an effective date of 1 January 2014, and as soon as these reports are available, they will be incorporated within the government's financial statements. The balance sheet also indicates that core government's debt is expected to be $523.5 million at the 30th of June 2015. No long-term borrowings will be incurred during the year ending 30th June 2015. The amount of debt principal to be repaid during the year is $25.4 million. Cash flow statements. The cash flow statement is shown on page 320 of the Annual Plan and Estimates document, and it indicates the following. The cash flow with respect to property, plant, and equipment or fixed assets acquisition by government will be $26.7 million during the year. The cash outflow with respect to the government's equity investments in its statutory authorities and government-owned companies is $20.3 million. Government's bank account balances are expected to increase by $82.5 million during the year ending 30th June 2015. At 30th June 2015, government's operating bank account balances are expected to total $129.9 million, whilst restricted and reserve bank account balances, such as general reserves, environmental protection fund, and national disaster fund, etc., are expected to total $126.2 million. Honorable members, I would now like the committee to consider the appropriations in the schedule to the bill, starting with the appropriations to the Premier as Minister for Home and Community Affairs Ministry. Within that ministry, we'll start with the Home Affairs element of the ministry, followed by the Community Affairs, and then the Cabinet Office. The first output is HCA 1, Policy Advice.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt, but if I could make one general request before you get into the detail. I would humbly ask you to ask your staff to do a word search of all of the budgetary documents, so you can tell me how many times Northside appears in the budget documents.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Miller. That's an exercise that would have to be done back at the, and then reported later on. Thank you, sir. The first output group is HCA1, Policy Advice and Ministerial Services on Home Affairs Matters for an amount of $2,784,219, of which are shown on page 55 of the annual plan and estimates, but I've also distributed the schedule to the bill with the various numbers there, page numbers. So if you turn to page 2, you will see HCA1 at the top of page 2, and it is found on page 55, and you can follow along accordingly, or you can turn into your annual plan and estimates documents. Are there any questions with respect to HCA1, Policy Advice and Ministerial Services on Home Affairs Matters for an amount of $2,784,219?
Mr. Chairman, this is where personnel matters would normally be covered, right, for this ministry.
Mr. Miller, I'm being told that apparently it is not covered within this particular output.
Which particular output? But somewhat, isn't it the minister's staff that's giving the policy advice?
This is the core ministry itself, not the various departments under that ministry.
So this advice is coming from staff outside of the ministry, or?
Mr. Premier?
Mr. Chairman, if the member looks at the bottom of the page, he'll see that the group comprises ABS outputs, immigration, hazard management, and home affairs, and police. And the cross-reference numbers are there.
Mr. Miller, are you satisfied with what has been said? Has the answer been provided?
No, the question has not been answered. I'm asking if, isn't it personnel within the ministry that is providing this policy advice to the minister? Because quality says all personnel providing advice is qualified in his or her area of expertise.
Mr. Chairman, I did answer the question. I said personnel for the ministry is covered in this. Personnel for the ministry, the core.
At what stage the amendments to the immigration law is at, because there is, under plan legislation, there is an amendment to the immigration law to come during this year. And in particular, what advice has been given from the immigration department on the operation of the most recent amendments to the election law? immigration.
Is that the complete question?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Chairman, the reference here is to the proposed amendments, not, that is, those to take effect in the coming fiscal year, not the current year that we're in. Those that are contemplated in the coming year will be based on the report of the Immigration Review Committee that has been in place for the best part of a year. And as I noted again last night, are with respect to improvements to the work permit application process principally. And as I also indicated last night, we are looking very carefully at adopting an accreditation process with respect to good corporate citizens and finding ways to incentivize companies to employ more Caymanians, provide more training opportunities, and so forth. So that is really what is contemplated within the coming year. Members will obviously have good notice of that. There'll be a bill put out in good time for members to be able to consider. But we're not at that stage yet where we're actually drafting any amending legislation. The second part of the member's question related to, I'm not sure I got it, but I think he's asking how well the amendments that were made are actually working. I think indications are that they are working quite well. We still have issues around the permanent residence process. But in large part, that relates to the backlog of permanent residence applications, which the board is actually working through. I can say that with respect to the issue of the section in the permanent residence regulations that relates to, struggling here. No, the occupations, the not preferred occupation, the priority, thank you, the priority occupations that the caucus and the cabinet are in the process of looking at that with the ministry, and in relatively short time, I think we'll be able to make some pronouncements about our view on whether we ought to determine that there should be some priority occupations, and if so, what they should be.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLean, is there a follow-up question? Or Mr. Miller?
Thank you. Yes. I wonder if the Premier can tell us, Mr. Chairman, based on advice from the Immigration Department, if we are going to see any changes, even though he has said that it is working well, all indications are it is working well, any changes to the point system, and if that is now being used for the one's backlog, because I believe there was a provision then there not to use that for the one's backlog.
Mr. Chairman, there's presently no advocacy and no consideration being given by the government to change the system which was recently introduced, the point system which was recently introduced, which increased the minimum number of points which a successful applicant has to accumulate from 100 to 110. But it also increased the possibilities, the possibility of getting substantially more points than did the previous regime. those applications which were made, which were submitted before the law was changed, are considered in accordance with the law that existed at the time. So it is only applications which would have gone in after the law was changed that are considered under the new regime.
Mr. McLean, Mr. Miller, you.
Yeah, can I ask you, the minister through you, for a justification in the $250,000 increase in expenditure when neither the quantity nor the quality of the policy advice has increased?
Mr. Chairman, just a moment while I confer.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this is quicker if I ask the Chief Officer to answer rather than him explaining this technical detail to me and me trying to relate it.
Mr. Bush, before you answer, for the record, could you please state your full name and title?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Eric Bush, Chief Officer for the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as the Premier stated before, this group consists of policy advice from Immigration, Ministry of Home Affairs, Hazard Management, and the police. In Immigration 1 in particular, there's an increase from $277,000 to $348,000 in this one particular area. I do note that the number of reports submitted has not increased from the forecast of this year versus next year. However, that is what the increase is from is the Immigration Department shifting cost centers from operational areas towards policy advice on immigration matters as it relates to prohibited immigrants, deportees, migration management, et cetera, as well as the pre-clearance of U.S. immigration and custom authorities. Also within the Ministry of Home Affairs, in response to the growing issues that we have around the detention of personnel, whether it be in our prisons or whether it be in the Immigration Detention Center, we have bolstered our resources within the ministry by hiring an individual who is specialized in that. That is an increase within the ministry itself, as well as I think there's about $50,000 or $60,000 of an increase in the ministry's depreciation budget compared to this year, whereby we have purchased software and other operational equipment that has a depreciation amount to it of around $50,000 or $60,000.
Mr. McLean? Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question, but just to follow up on that one, would depreciation be in this section?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, through you, sir.
Yes.
My understanding is that the figures that we are seeing here consist of personnel costs and all costs associated with that, supplies and consumables, and depreciation as main title categories.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Never heard of policy being depreciated, but anyhow. What the police now? What you?
No, I got plenty of questions.
The police. What kind of advice this is that would be given to the Premier on the police matters? Because the Premier responsibility, constitutional responsibility, is for financial matters with the police. Is this policy advice on the amounts of police needed and to have a full complement, that kind of stuff?
Mr. Bush? Sorry, Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Chairman, the policy advice isn't just given to the office of the Premier. It is policy advice that is being provided by the Ministry of Home and Community Affairs. So whoever needs that advice, it gets paid for here.
Mr. Bush? Mr. McLean? Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, just so that I can perhaps make the point more powerfully, if the member looks at page 97 of the annual budget statements, Police 8, you see the description says, provide policy and security advice to Her Excellency the Governor, the Deputy Governor, the Cabinet, National Security Council, and the Anti-Corruption Commission, as well as non-government entities. The Office of Premier is actually not singled out.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLean, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, sir. This is where I really needed to get to, but you got to ask other things first. I wonder if the Premier can tell us what advice the police has given him on the complements of policing. Just a minute, Mr. Chairman, please. Particularly to address the commitment that the Premier gave myself and the member from Northside on the 21st day of November after I made a statement in the House.
Sorry, Mr. McLean, it appears that Mr. McLaughlin, can you ask the question again?
Okay.
Because there was a long pause between starting and completing, so for the sake
Okay.
of comprehension.
Okay. I was wondering what advice the Commissioner had given to the Premier office or wherever, to the government and in particular the Premier, because the Premier committed to a particular time to get back to the member from Northside and I on the 21st of November. And I'm just wondering what transpired since November the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, a lot of things have transpired. I spent some considerable time yesterday when I was winding up the debate, but unfortunately the member from East End was not present, so he didn't get the benefit of that. But I don't recall the details of the discussion that occurred in Finance Committee 6 months ago or whenever it was. But I do know that on behalf of the government, I undertook for us to look at the situation with respect to policing in the eastern districts and to seek to come up with measures which would address the concerns, the legitimate concerns of the members from East End and Northside and the constituents of their respective districts. A considerable amount of effort has been made to address those concerns about more police presence and more aggressive approach to dealing with the issues, particularly as it related to burglary and what was perceived by the members, particularly the member from East End, about drug activity. I think that, again, rather than me trying to relate what the Commissioner will tell me, it is probably best, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, if I ask the Commissioner to address this himself.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Baines, for the record, could you please state your full name and title?
My name is David Baines and I'm the Police Commissioner for the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service.
Yes, sir.
In terms of this particular policy advice, the policy is given on various occasions. The most obvious one is in addressing the wider threat posed to security and policing issues, which are given during the National Security Council meetings when there's a wider discussion on a strategic level as to what the threats are. Secondly, I'm also invited on an ad hoc basis to speak about perceived or concerns that have been raised, and your example, sir, around, I believe you'd addressed Cabinet, and I was asked to talk about what we were doing in East End, and also to talk about how we could extend our neighbourhood policing issues to address concerns that have been raised. During the course of those briefings, and also in the budget setting, we go through and demonstrate the number of officers used in each department that we believe is critical to delivering the outputs required of us within the budget. The two are linked. The numbers of officers able to work on a shift system at a given time in a given area add up to patrol presence and investigation. Needless to say, our figure is 487. That's agreed by the moratorium board. It's agreed, and it's the discussions and advice at all of the meetings talk about if we have our establishment and the officers to the required number, this is what we can do. If we're required to operate at lesser numbers, there's obviously something has to give, and we try to work on a prioritised basis, so we, if you will, spin as many plates as we can, but inevitably some of the police service drops off if we're operating with 30, 40, 50 officers less than what is agreed by the department and indeed the moratorium board, which should be the establishment for the RCIPS. And at the moment, that is agreed at 487. Does that help, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Mr. McLean?
Oh yeah, that helps because it gets me to the question I really want to get to. Has advice that 487, I believe, is the full complement that you advised the government that you needed to get your job done?
Those are the figures, and the duties of those are critical to the outputs we agree that are fed into the ministry and are also repeated during the policy advice that's given either at Cabinet or indeed National Security Council or indeed separately to the Governor.
And that amount would satisfy the requirements for East End and North Side.
Yes, sir.
That is 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Miller?
Just a follow-up on that, and in the scheme of things, particularly in our side, having less crime than any other district leaves you in a position to have to not be in a position to provide or complement of what you have because of your demands in areas like Georgetown and West Bay and Bordentown. Is that reasonable deduction?
Yes, sir. The 487 is full complement, able to deploy in each area. Needless to say, if we're operating with less, we have to spread ourselves thinner. And we spread ourselves thinner by ensuring that those with less demand have less presence. I think that's a logical response.
Of course, my concern is that I'm old enough to remember when West Bay and Georgetown had very little crime. And my concern, as is the concern of the constituents that I represent, is that in the absence of police resources, the deterrent for criminal activity is a lot easier. And because you are unable, with the resources that you have, which I accept, to provide any more than once a day patrol per shift into my community, it is very easy for the criminals to determine, once they see you drive through the district, they're free for the rest of that shift, unless some citizen happens to report them, and then even when the citizen reports them, the commander in Barton Town don't have the resources to respond to the citizens' complaints.
I understand the point you're making, sir. However, it's not strictly accurate. The suggestion of having a single patrol going through Northside once is not an accurate description of how we operate. So there are officers who are deployed from Bodden Town whose patrol area is Northside, and equally one for East End. Rarely is it that they spend a single patrol going through. They will spend 8 hours in the district. We do have the issue about if you don't see a police officer, there's a belief you're not there. But I've been on the ground in Northside and in East End, and I've spent an 8 hour on a patrol presence. And I'm sure some of it was reported back to you by those who saw me. But the reality is there are very few people on the street. There are very few people that are engaging. There are a lot of empty houses there that are being checked. And of course, if you don't see the check taking place, the presumption is we're not doing anything. So, sir, I just want to reassure people in Northside, there isn't a single drive-through and a drive-out. There's a patrol presence there. I accept the perception is much greater if I can have an officer dedicated in Northside Station or in East End Station, and we've moved those issues ahead now to complement both the normal patrol but also the perception issues of having dedicated officers in each of those areas, which is why we've taken the action as we have done with 2 staff directly deployed from East End and 1 officer who's taking occupancy of the north side, who will be in occupancy from the 1st of July. He would have been there sooner, but there's some building issues that need renovating and fixing there.
We
But,
can take care of that first, sir.
all right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Baines.
I'm finished with the police. I want to get back to the personnel issues on this ministry.
I just, Mr. Chairman, if I may, with the
Yes, sir.
police.
I come back to them later on.
Mr. Chairman, at some stage, I have to be fair in my assessment and utterances. And let me thank the Commissioner and the government for what they're trying to do up there. And I think it's fair and reasonable that we do that, Mr. Miller and I.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's fair and reasonable. Give a dog his due, but we should all give all dogs their due. And we got to deal with the dogs later.
Mr. McLean, I appreciate the cliche, but let us use more favorable language.
Well, give every man his due.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
I shall remove myself from those. Mr. Chairman, I hear the Commissioner about the patrols, and I can say to him that there has been an increase in police presence in East End. However, I would caution that I too have made my patrols. Maybe you only did one, I did many. And waited up many hours in the night in the East End, watching when I should have been in my bed. I can tell you there are areas and times when the police are needed that they're not there. And that therein lies our problem. Thankfully, with the new setup that we have, hopefully, that will now change. And we will see greater intervention and the likes. And you know I support that. I would, again, as I said to Cabinet, ask that some policemen of some stature be on those patrol. No disrespect to any sex, but Little Rook is I don't think that's a training ground for them without someone being with them, especially those hours of the night, if that I have seen them. And that is asking for your assistance and their support.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Miller, you have a follow-up question?
I have some other police questions, but I'll raise them under the subheads that come up that deal directly with the police.
Okay.
But I have a continued question on the personnel, or increase or decrease. I think the chief officer said that they had hired a specialist recently. Can the chief officer tell me whether that position was advertised and whether there are any officers currently employed whose contracts may have recently expired or is about to expire that has not been advertised as yet?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. McLaughlin, you want to answer the question, or let Mr. Bush?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. First, the resource or the individual that we've hired to bolster our expertise and resources around detention and imprisonment of individuals, that position was not advertised. The reason for that, it is a temporary position. The person is on a 6-month contract, which looks to end this year. It is not intended to be a permanent position within the ministry, but we do feel we need this expertise to lay the foundation of policy and procedure to get us up to a best standard. I will say that Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prison, which came in 2012 at our invitation, has again confirmed at our invitation that they will visit and re-inspect the prison and police cells at the early part of next year. So again, this is our response to some of the issues identified, whereby policies, procedures, best practices, and training can be provided through this individual. Mr. Chair, the second question around contracts having expired and or about to expire and haven't been advertised. I don't know of many contracts. I don't know of any contracts having expired. There is one that is about to, and there is an advertisement in the Compass today and on CS Messages, I believe, for one of those positions.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
For the position that I know to be expired, contract to be expiring soon.
Does the regulations provide for in a particular lead time in advertising the current employee position so that the current employee has time to look for alternative employment? Or is there, for instance, is there the regulation require that positions be advertised 3 months before, or is there any such requirement?
While Mr. Bush is seeking advice from his staff, I'll take this opportunity to run through the order of proceedings with respect to the various ministries and portfolios and offices. Currently, we are considering the appropriations for the Ministry of Home Affairs. But following the Ministry of Home Affairs, we will consider the appropriations for the Ministry of Community Affairs. Following Community Affairs, we will consider the Cabinet Office. And then after that, the Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Following PLAHI, we will consider the Ministry of Health, Sports, Youth and Culture. After that, we will look at the appropriations for the Ministry of Financial Services, Commerce and Environment. Then the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Following that, we will then deal with the appropriations for the Ministry of Education, Employment, and Gender Affairs, and then the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, and then the portfolio of the Civil Service, and then Legal Affairs, Judicial Administration, and then the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and then the Office of the Complaints Commissioner, and finally, the Audit Office. And I will circulate a copy of this document shortly, and I'll ask the Sarge if he could please come and take a copy and give to each of the members if they haven't yet already received a copy. Mr. Bush?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. To try and answer the question, my understanding is that for contracted officers, if they wish to renew, they are supposed to give written notice of their intentions, or their desire, I should say, to renew. We go through a moratorium process around that time. However, for there being the question around there being a regulation or a policy of how much time it should be advertised up to the contract ending, I'm told no.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. McLean? Mr. Miller, sorry. Mr. Miller?
So there's no requirement. You're saying that there is a requirement, but it is not specific in time, that the contracted officer should notify you that they wish to have their contract renewed, but there is no specific time frame for you to respond back to the contracted officer to inform them whether you're going to review the contract or not? Or is he to assume that not heard from you, it expires on the day that it expired?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't speak to exactly what is in the regulation. I can certainly say, as an employer, best practices, you should respond to your employees. That would be standard. Not.
But you just got an award in a newspaper for having the best run department in government, and you don't have these kind of best practices at your fingertips 3 months, 6 months, a year. The other question on the person that was recruited without advertising, what I understood from your answer is that this person is to provide the expertise for you that the current prison director does not have.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the prison director is responsible for the day-to-day running of the prison service and all of the areas that involve that. With all of the issues identified through the HMIP report, it is simply too much for one individual to do in the period of time that we want it done. HMIP came to the Cayman Islands, and HMIP is Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons, came to the Cayman Islands in 2012 and essentially said we have one of the worst run prisons. It is a goal of the Ministry of Home Affairs to fix that issue, fix that perception, and hopefully that will be evidenced in 2015 when they return and again inspect and present their report. It is not that the prison director does not have that expertise. It is simply the volume of work and issues around policies, procedures, best practices, laws that the ministry felt we needed for a short period of time to increase our capacity in this area to make a very good attempt of fixing some of these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you, the chief officer just said, I believe, that there is one person in the ministry that their contract is coming due shortly. I wonder if he can tell us whether or not that person, at what stage did that person indicate he or she wanted to continue? wanted a renewal of contract.
Mr. Bush.
Can I have a minute, Mr. Chair?
And for the sake of planning our affairs while they confer, we will break anywhere between 12:30 and 1:45 and 12:45, anywhere between 12:30 and 12:45 for lunch, and then we will resume promptly at 2 p.m. this afternoon, so everyone can plan their affairs accordingly.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I am told that it was not at the 6-month mark. It was certainly within that. It was quite recently that the individual, and I'm trying to be as vague as I can because, just out of respect that we're talking about an individual here, they indicated the willingness to renew or the desire to renew, and we are going out. We have gone out in the papers seeing if there are any qualified Caymanians willing and able to do the position.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know why we have to be vague about this, but be that as it may, this opens up a whole new can of questions. I mean, the first one is, when does this contract expire?
Mr. Chair, I'm told the 15th of June.
Not this June. This one?
Mr. Chair, the 15th of June, 2015.
2000.
Sorry, 2014, excuse me. Apologies.
15th of June 2014, Mr. McLean.
But, Mr. Chairman, what are the 6 days? Today's what, the 6th? 5th, 10 days. And, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I wonder how long the advertisement is out for.
What date is that? Mr. Chair, just excuse me, I'm trying to find out. Mr. Chair, I'm told the ad first ran today, will run again next week with a closing date, I'm told, on Tuesday the 17th, which is per the regulations of the amount of time. Sorry, not the closing date. Excuse me, apologies. That's when the last ad will be done. I will try to find out when the closing day is for everybody's information.
Sorry, for the sake of clarity, can you repeat it all over again?
Yes, sir. I'm told the ad which ran today in the Caymanian Compass for the position within the ministry will run as per the regulations, and the last day it will be publicly advertised in the newspaper will be Tuesday the 17th of June. But what I'm not sure of right now is the closing day.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, are we to assume then that the contract has expired? And I don't know where these questions came from, Mr. Chairman, but it begs one question right after the other. I'm sorry, but that's what is happening.
I think he said earlier that the contract expires on the 15th of June 2014.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that question.
So the last advertisement, Mr. Chairman, putting my logic to it, is the 17th of June. And that means the contract will be expired because the person cannot apply for that job. This is an advertisement for others to apply to fill that job, which I assume would be Cayman and sends the person on contract. So what do we do? I mean, the person not going to be here anymore. Is that it? I mean, that could be the last question right there now.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that this kind of questioning and examination is very helpful to the committee or even to the members. If the member would simply ask, get to the point, what is it that he's seeking to, what information is it he's seeking to obtain, we'll do our best to answer it. We don't need to go through this series of examinations, cross-examination as though we're in court. Just ask the question directly and we'll do our best to answer. Otherwise, we're going to be here for days on minuscule points like this.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. In all fairness to the member, I do think that he's trying to establish something. And Mr. McLean, your last question, could you repeat it more concisely so that we can identify what exactly it is?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, sir. Mr. Chairman, whomever this is who's contracted, I suspect is not a Caymanian. The objective of advertising it is so Caymanians can replace that person. By time it is over, the advertisement is over for Caymanians to apply, the person will have been gone. That's a simple question.
Mr. Bush.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I understand the member's point, and again, I will try to do my best to explain the situation. The contract expires on the 15th of June. The regulations, I'm told, state that a contracted employee should notify the employer 6 months prior to the 15th of June. That did not happen. That happened recently. We have put out advertisements. They are late. I accept that. In this scenario, we have two options available to us. We have the option to ask the Deputy Governor to exercise his powers and allow us to issue a new short-term contract for 3 months to allow us to go through the full recruitment exercise because, again, we started it late as the ministry, accepted, or we allow the position to remain vacant and it is filled temporarily in an acting capacity by deputies. We have applied to the Deputy Governor to extend the contract for 3 months to allow the recruitment process. Again, that was late. I'll say it again. To allow us to see if there are qualified and willing Caymanians willing to do this job that is now advertised in the Caymanian Compass.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, and I see where this is going, but this is for the Caymanians who are capable, and I don't know what position this is. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it is advertised, it is the Chief Financial Officer for the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And there are other Caymanians that can act in the meantime?
Once the current CFO is away, there are deputy CFOs, yes.
And the CFO did not apply in time to meet his contractual agreement with the government, and we waive that?
Yes, sir.
And there are Caymanians who are qualified
There are Caymanians that are qualified for what, sir?
to fill that position.
As I said,
Within the ministry I'm talking about.
Mr. Chair, through you,
Mr. Bush.
I've tried to explain the best I can of the whole issue and the issues. If there is any Caymanian, whether it be in a ministry or not, that wishes to apply, they are certainly free to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'm being pointed towards the paper and the advertisement. This is after the fact. I am saying that we have a contracted officer who broke his contract. There are Caymanians who fill in there, just said it, I just learned that, who are qualified or more so, I don't know. And we are continuing this process and giving this person 3 months more with the possibility that that person is going to apply. Is that person also able to apply for this position?
Mr. Bush, yes or no, is the person able to apply for the position that's being advertised, the current post holder?
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall the exact wording.
Not if he is going to, if he is able to.
Yes, sir, I understand the question. I'm just saying I can't remember exactly what is put on the ad. I just don't want to say if we put Caymanians only to apply. I just want to reiterate, Mr. Chairman, if you will, please. There has been no breach of contract. There has been, the contract is in force. The contract expires on the 15th of June this year, in a couple of days. And we have asked the Deputy Governor for permission to issue a new short-term contract for 3 months to allow us to continue and complete this exercise.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, I think it's established that the gentleman did not comply with the contractual provision that he should, well, that's not really a breach of contract, sir. The job is advertised, and Mr. Bush is unable to answer whether or not the post holder is able to apply for the job. Is there another question? Okay, Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to confirm that my understanding of the ad that's in today's paper on page 20, qualifications, skill, and experience. The post holder must have a bachelor's degree in accounting or business administration, as well as a professional accounting qualification with a minimum of 10 years relevant experience. Alternatively, candidates with a minimum of 15 years relevant experience with at least 10 years at a supervisor level may qualify. Does that mean that somebody who has 15 years experience but has neither a bachelor's degree in accounting or business administration or a professional qualification can apply?
Mr. Chair, through you, yes.
Yes, Mr. Bush.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to confirm.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask then, are there any Caymanians within this ministry or service, for that matter, that has those professional qualifications? What are they, is it?
Bachelor's degree, professional accounting.
But whatever they are, plus, I know there's many in there with master's degree too, plus professional qualification. Is there any in there that can be moved into this spot?
Mr. Bush, if I may supplement Mr. McLean's question, is there anyone who has thus far applied, even though the ad is only published today, is there anyone who would have known prior and would have then applied?
So we've just started the process today. I think that is the conflict or strife of the whole issue is that we've started the process late. There's no denying that. I've said it many times. we are starting an open recruitment, an open competitive recruitment process for the position of the Chief Financial Officer in the Ministry of Home Affairs. We started it today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, are there any Caymanian deputies who have bachelor's degrees in accounting or bachelor's degrees in business administration and a professional accounting qualification at this time?
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes.
Thank you.
Why then are we allowing somebody who has no academic qualifications but just 15 years experience to apply for such a high position and going to supervise Caymanians who have the academic qualifications and the professional qualifications?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not understanding the context of the question. The reason being is what we're saying is that the Ministry of Home Affairs is starting an open, competitive process that is regulated by the PSML and its regulations and the policies and procedures of the civil service. If any qualified Caymanian or otherwise wants to apply, this is us opening the door saying, here is the opportunity. We will go through a recruitment process that is standard and we will pick the best individual.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, well, this is contrary to the publicly declared position of the Deputy Governor in terms that whenever we get an opportunity to upgrade the qualifications for positions, we do it. We had a case last year where all of a sudden the surveyors had to have law degrees because that improved their ability to deal with the lawyers and to deal with the administration of the ministry. What this indicates to me is that here we are allowing people who do not have academic qualifications, nor professional qualifications, to apply for a position, and we already have Caymanians in deputy positions who has the academic qualifications and the professional qualifications. So I don't understand why we're lowering the standard for the CFO below that we have required for the deputy CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Now, whilst I did say, Mr. Chair, that we have deputy CFOs that have the qualification, I don't think I ever said that the position required it, which I believe is what I heard. Why are we lowering the standard for the CFO of what we require of a deputy CFO?
But
No, I'm just trying to.
I think.
okay, let me ask the difficult question. Does the current person who occupies this position have the academic qualifications and the professional qualifications?
Mr. Chairman, I'm told yes.
Okay. What I don't understand is the person that has it, who through no fault of theirs, in this position where the ads are put out after the contract is right, has the professional qualifications and academic qualifications. Why are we inviting people that have neither to apply for the position? That's what I don't understand.
Mr. Miller, I think perhaps it was not the best drafted advert in the sense that if someone comes with a qualification and some comes with 15 years experience, then hopefully the interview panel would be able to distinguish between which is more important.
No,
Given
sorry.
the lateness as to which they went about putting out the advert, that may be an oversight as to the 15 years experience without the academic and professional qualification. I would hope that they would give preference to the Caymanian with the necessary qualifications. But Mr. Bush, if you want to elaborate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to further state that the job description of the Chief Financial Officer in the ministry is not unique. The qualifications and standards and minimum requirements to apply for the job are, in my understanding, are standard throughout the throughout other ministries as well. That's my understanding, and it is certainly regulated and approved by the portfolio of the civil service, which in essence is the gatekeeper of those issues. Now, those are the minimum requirements to apply for the job. If an individual has more qualifications or more experience, that's where the competitive nature of the recruitment process comes in. And we look to identify who has the best qualifications, who has the most pertinent experience, and who would best fit within the ministry to assist the ministry in all its policy advice, in its financial affairs, etc. But the job description and the advertisement simply looks to state what the minimum requirements are for an individual, whether it be in experience or in education, for them to even consider applying. It doesn't say what the absolute perfect applicant is. It looks to set out the minimum an individual has to have to even consider applying.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. I can see where the member from Northside and from East End would have an issue given what transpired in Finance Committee last year concerning the law degree issue. I can see where they're coming from. And I will ask one question of my own as a representative for the people of the Cayman Islands. Is there any policy against the qualified Caymanian deputy being given the head position and then the CFO, the current CFO, being given a new contract, given that their contract expired or will expire shortly, giving them the deputy position? Is there any policy against that? Is there anything that you can see that may be a problem? If we are trying to upskill the civil service and give qualified Caymanians the jobs, is there any policy against that?
Mr. Chairman, to answer your question succinctly, I don't know of any policy. Of course, in any scenario, employment is a relationship with the employer and employee.
We follow that.
You would have to have agreement on both sides. But to answer your question, sir, I don't know of any policy or or precedent of it ever being done.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Thank you. Are there any further questions with respect to output HCA1 policy advice and ministerial services on home affairs matters? Okay. I'll move to the vote. All those in favor of HCA1 policy advice and ministerial services on home affairs matters for the sum of $2,784,219 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. HCA2 licensing services, $501,021, found on page 56 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions with respect to HCA2 licensing services? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I promise you I won't be as long this time. Well, it depends on the answers we get, and this one is, I believe the Commissioner, this is about firearms. Mr. Chairman, through you, I don't know if the Premier can answer it or his deputy, but Chief Officer. With gun license, whenever there's a renewal, people have to get references, police record, and it's, what, 3 years? I mean, the same police record that you have to go apply for can be researched by the police that get an application, isn't it? I don't know why we need to get these references, because I thought they were character references, and the only way your character is blemish, I believe, in this regard, would be if people go to court and on something, and the person would not have the gun. Is there any changes coming to remove some of that? I understand the first time you get a license, but when you go renew it, you need all those same things that you did for the initial application.
Mr. Baines?
So I understand the point you're making. Of course, that is assuming everything of the applicant has stayed the same, either in the form of their control and access to the firearm, and they can engage in activities that are not deemed criminal, but are deemed irresponsible, that would warrant a review of their actions at that time when the license should either be revoked or taken away. Or indeed, we may have had information from family members that they have been suffering from a medical condition that would render them potentially a threat to themselves or indeed others if they retain possession of the firearm. But the police record is a belt and braces, sir, so that we don't miss out in it coming through that somebody's had a conviction or somebody's been involved in a, shall we say, domestic violence incident where they've had a conviction, and we've just received their application for renewal, and we take it at face value. It ensures we go through every one of our systems, and it places an obligation on the license holder in order to ensure that their application is considered as fully as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is it not possible for the police to charge me the $25 for the police record, but just do the research internally? Don't require me to go and deliver my passport, take 2 hours to stand in line, go back the next day, get the police record. And I understand the government needs the $25 for the revenue. Just add it on to the license when you go there. The license fee is $1,000 or whatever it is, plus the $25 for the police record. But the police simply searches the computer for the record rather than the person having to spend 2 days trying to get a paper copy. And the National Trust would be glad to know where we save some trees.
Mr. Chairman, the member's concern is legitimate, and it is one of the issues that the government is seeking to address with its e-government initiative, to interconnect the various government departments so that we can still derive the revenue we need, but that the application can be made either online or in a hard copy form, but the processing can all be done, and the one fee is charged, which can be broken down into the various components. That is a big part of the initiative that is on the way, which we do hope we will make great progress on over the course of this fiscal year. And police records is definitely top of the list.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any further questions with respect to HCA2, licensing services? Okay. All those in favor of HCA2 licensing services for $501,021, standing par of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. HCA3, enforcement of immigration laws, $1,641,346, found on page 57 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions?
Just to ask the Premier, to confirm that this increase here is the actual enforcement officers that were promised when we passed the TELEP immigration, and we were assured that there would be officers would be recruited and put on the job very early so as to increase the enforcement of the law. And if so, how many officers have actually been recruited, trained, or on the job?
Mr. Chairman, the member is correct. The increase is with respect to the 5 positions, and all of them should be in post July, next month.
So none has been put in post since December. They all will be completed training, everything, and start work in July.
Yes.
Okay.
There was a significant lag between what we had hoped for and what actually occurred.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Ms. O'Connor Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 57, under quantity and number of administrative fines levied, I wonder if the Honourable Premier, if his assistants could inform the committee as to the quantity of administrative fees levied and the percentage collected. And secondly, why is it not recorded as a third-party revenue or set off with the cost of this particular item?
Mr. Chairman, the technical answer is that administrative fines are regarded as coercive revenue, not third-party revenue.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any further questions with respect to?
Mr. Chairman, the member has indicated that I have only answered part of the question, so I'm trying to get the other part.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the other part of the question was where would this have been reflected? And my advice is that it's in the executive, revenue to the executive, but I don't have a precise reference at the moment. We'll see if we can find it and come back to it if that's okay with the member.
Ms. O'Connor Connolly, is that?
That's okay, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to ascertain whether these coercive revenues go to general revenue or whether it remains for the exclusive utilization within the said department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor Connolly. Mr. McLaughlin, you want to answer the question?
Mr. Chairman, I was hoping as Minister of Finance you would have helped me with that one.
Your budget they're asking about, sir.
But I believe it goes to general revenue, not to the specific department. Okay. Mr. Chairman, if the member will turn to page 336 of the annual plan and estimates, which has been helpfully pointed out to me by the Financial Secretary, for which I thank him. There is note 16, coercive revenue, 3/4 of the way down the page. Immigration fines, budget 2014-15, $300,000.
Are there any further questions with respect to output HCA3? Enforcement of immigration laws? If there are no further questions, Mr. McLean?
Okay, I'm just holding on my mic. Sorry about that. I thought you.
I thought so, but
Yeah. No, I'm holding on to my mic to get your attention.
okay, sure. Please proceed, sir.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I note that this enforcement of immigration laws, obviously got 2 illegal immigrants recently. I wonder if we could be told how many we have caught illegal in the country as a result of these patrols, enforcement, whichever we want to call them.
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the Chief Immigration Officer to address that.
And Mr. Chairman, while the Chief Immigration Officer is doing that, she might be able to explain to us how it's done, patrol, how the enforcements are done, whether they patrol on a regular basis or on an irregular basis or whatever, or if they wait for information to be received.
Ms. Evans, for the record, could you please state your full name and title?
Linda Evans, Chief Immigration Officer.
Thank you.
With regards to illegal landers, basically, we work in conjunction with the Marine Unit, which during their patrols, they will ordinarily find, canoe boats or otherwise with persons on board that are obviously trying to land illegally. We also find that we get input from the community in terms of persons who may, in fact, be here illegally. And again, we work with the police to apprehend those persons.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
Or the first part of it was, how many have we been catching? If it's an ordinate amount, or is it just infrequent?
It's probably happening more than we know, but certainly over the last couple of weeks we've caught 2, less than 10 per year. Normally we will take them to court, and you will find that they'll come right back when they're released from prison.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. McLean, is there a follow-up question?
There would be, but it need recall that Commissioner now to find out about these patrols around our country, because that is the point of entry, Mr. Chairman, and maybe the Premier can answer it as to how much we are patrolling our shorelines to prevent this kind of entry, illegal entry into our country. Because, Mr. Chairman, the Premier will recall, and all the members that were PPM when we were in Cabinet, precisely what we went through in 2005.
Mr. McLean, is there a specific question that someone can be responsible for answering?
How often, what are we doing to increase the patrols around our islands to prevent this?
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask the Commissioner if he can address that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Yes, sir. Regarding the police patrols, we have a joint marine unit that's made up primarily of police officers, but there are contingents of both customs and officers and immigration officers. And the fact that it's a joint marine unit reflects the nature of its deployment and also how those deployments are made. So there is a role for dealing with customs violations with immigration, or indeed with criminal violations. There is not a general patrol. We try and direct our patrols to target what the threat is. It's a big ocean. There's no point in sitting at one end unless you've got clear indication. We do have targeted patrol areas which are the normal, if you will, zones by which illegal entrants or drug shipments are believed to be coming through. You won't be surprised they sit between us and the BRAC, and the primary threat that's posed is via Jamaica. But in addition to that, there's another role which is about the search and rescue. It's about assistance to people who need help. It's about rescue operations. So we use intelligence to direct us and our vessels to where we believe we're going to be most use most of the time. And sometimes that will be border security issues, and sometimes it'll be monitoring an event. We have in total around 6 vessels. We are not up to our full complement on them. Equally, neither customs nor immigration have got their full contingent of what should be their part of the joint marine unit. So that affects our presence there. You will be aware, sir, there was discussions in this budget. There's a partial involvement about trying to increase an added patrol out of the BRAC, so we can cover part of the zone from a joint marine unit that is based in the BRAC, which will be made up of both marine, environmental health, fire and rescue, customs, and police officer involvement there. The costing of that was in the region, the bid that was put in was in the region of 300,000. I'm told we've got somewhere in the region of 150 allocated, of which the use and patrol of those areas includes an element for fuel, which is limited to $6,000. And I have to say, with some of our vessels, that would equate to about 1.5 patrol over an annual period. So we balance our vessels, our available staff, to the intelligence that's provided to make sure we have most effective use of some very expensive assets and the marine assets themselves.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you giving me? Is he giving me?
Mr. Conley, are you giving way? Mr.
Wow.
McLean, he has
Yes,
given
Mr.
you way.
Chairman.
Oh,
Thank you.
seniority, we got that. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Connolly. Mr. Chairman, I'm hearing lack of resources to fund these boats and fund the patrols. It got to be something, sir, because I want to see them come out during smooth weather. It got to be dead smooth, like Mega Bay Pond, for them be out. Because they don't. Now, I see them on patrol, in their cars, around East End. But, Mr. Chairman, I just need to ask the Commissioner, what are we doing about, there is no patrol in Cayman Brac now, and this, I saw where they were proposing that, and I think the Premier said so in his throne speech as well. Are we now sending the boat to Cayman Brac that was due to go there from 2009?
We are looking to facilitate one of the vessels that's based in Grand Cayman over into Cayman Brac. Then we're looking to create a marine-capable unit, which is a combination of fire, environmental, police, and customs, that are most of whom are all existent in the BRAC. And we'd be looking to rotate some marine officers out to go in to have a patrol presence to deal with that section of our intelligence and patrol plan, where we have interdiction patrols in what are high value or high risk areas. What I would say is that we think in our border security operations, both in marine and air assets at the same time. Needless to say, the helicopter can cover significantly greater period of ocean, has greater forward-looking infrared and camera capabilities to detect vessels, pick up body heat, and he's able to cover the high-risk block area between ourselves and Jamaica in a much more effective and cost-effective way than a vessel. So we combine the two based on what the information is.
Yes, and I thank you for that. But, Mr. Chairman, that vessel should have been, that was expressly bought for the Cayman Brac Patrol in 2007, 2008. But anyway, be that as it may, I look like on an game Cayman Brac that till now. Mr. Chairman, has the Commissioner considered one of the things that we considered when we were purchasing this equipment, to have volunteers come to, quote unquote, Coast Guard to assist in that, in that. Of course, they would have to be sworn in or whatever,
Yes,
in accordance with for your insurance. We don't want to talk about the helicopter, that comes up a little later on the week. But for volunteers to do it, like special constables. I recall when we were doing it, when we were buying these things, that was one of the things we were thinking about, that this would also serve with the rescue stuff, really. They can't go out on your business with your business, but with rescue and stuff.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, Mr. Baines, proceed.
Two initiatives. You're right to say the vehicle for us doing this to allow people who are volunteers would be via the special constabulary. We have discussed and we have agreed where we have people with specialist marine skills, it would make eminent sense that we would use them in the marine environment and attach them. So the answer is yes, and I think we've explored one, if not two individuals to do that. I will check and come back to you because I cannot confirm if that's gone a step further. We are at the moment exploring one other initiative which is trying to support youth, and that is one of our older vessels which is costing us significantly more to maintain. We're looking to pass to the marine section of the Cadet Corps as part of a training environment for cadets who can be brought up in the marine environment, and that's ongoing as we speak, involving another ministry, Ms. Jennifer Ahern, to see whether that can work. Needless to say, that will allow us to do two things: not throwing extra money in maintenance on a vessel that's now costing us more for maintenance, but it would allow them from youth services to secure some sponsorship and additional funding to support youngsters in the skill and development areas. We do work closely with the Cadet Corps now. It would make sense that, having developed their skill sets, we use them in a law enforcement agency, subject to the vetting that you've spoken about.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. Mr. Conley, you had a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is actually going back for the Chief Immigration Officer, and just wanting to follow up on the compliance officers that we voted for the last budget, and just what the status is of those compliance officers, and are they and what exactly is their remit if they have been hired.
Mr. Connolly, I think that Mr. McLaughlin is saying that he answered that question already.
Yeah, sorry, it was a follow-up to what his answer was. I just didn't get in time.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Mr. McLaughlin, it's a follow-up to your answer.
How many have been hired, and what is it that their remit is?
I think that Mr. McLaughlin has said that they will be recruiting 5 in this coming fiscal year. They were unable to do so in the current fiscal year, for which the funds were voted last year.
Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, I actually went further than that. I said that there were 5 who would be starting in July.
And also then what their remit would be. That was the additional.
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll ask the Chief Immigration Officer to address the job description part of it.
Thank you.
It's a team of 5 headed by an assistant chief immigration officer, and they will be responsible for servicing the boards and administrators in terms of compliance with what is presented to them, as well as inspections and the normal investigating of offenses.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. Connolly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And through you, can we just understand when we say inspections, I mean, how is that carried out? And this question is to the Chief Immigration Officer in terms of, is this reactive or proactive based on information through the work permit regime, et cetera?
Thank you. Ms. Evans?
Our intention is for it to be both. I do believe that for it to be proactive, we may have to amend the law slightly, but they are able to currently go out to businesses basically and ensure that what has been presented to the boards or the administrators is in fact accurate. For instance, their business plans, if they say they have training programs, verifying that that is the case. If they say they have someone understudying, a Caymanian understudying an expatriate, to verify that that is in fact so. So currently they are able to do that, but I would like to see it have a proactive element as well, where it becomes a regular occurrence as a deterrent.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. Connolly?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just one more question, and the reason why I asked reactive and proactive is that in my constituent office, I get a lot of complaints about ads in the papers, et cetera, that are very much tailored in their minds to certain people, basically, because the combination of experience it can only be very subjective. Like, what is the remit of the Chief Immigration Officer and her team to, if someone reports one of these things that's questionable and they agree with that, it raises more questions than answers, can those enforcement officers go and question that, or does it happen to that extent? Or what happens in that instance when someone would come forward and say, here's something that is, you have to speak 16 different languages to answer a telephone, that sort of thing. It's so apparent. What happens there?
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Generally, that is handled by the boards or the administrators simply by asking for an explanation for what has been presented as a requirement for a role. Usually that would highlight if there's any serious discrepancies to basically if it's matching the person that they're seeking to have a work permit for, and the board will address that in a manner that they see fit based on what's presented to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
And through you, Mr. Chairman. In December, when we did the TELUP legislation, we introduced a new fine of $20,000 for that kind of activity, but specifically not reporting that they have interviewed a Cayman. Has there been any instance when anybody applying for a permit has been fined at $20,000 since it was put in law?
No, sir. Currently, we are investigating two occurrences.
Thank you. Are there any further questions with respect to HCA 3, Enforcement of Immigration Laws? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of HCA 3, Enforcement of Immigration Laws for $1,641,346, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. HCA 4, Processing Status and Permanent Residency Applications, $128,053, found on page 58 of the Annual Plan and Estimates. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, if I may ask the Premier or whomever he wishes to answer, how many permanent residence applications do we have in backlog? And how many do we have from our little tele business?
Mr. McLaughlin.
The ability to have a term limit exemption permit ended at 28th of October 2013, so there's currently no persons holding such a facility. We currently have in excess of 200 applications pending for permanent residency under the new point system. So having applied after the new amendment came into effect on the 25th of October. That also, the applicants are before the law change in October is also in excess of 200, which they're currently working to conclude.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. McLean.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the CIO for clarifying that for me. But I knew anyway, but that's what I was talking about. After the law change, as a result of ending the end of the TELEP, that's 200 and something. And then the other one is 200 and something.
Mr. Chairman, I need to clarify that. The TLEPs have little or nothing to do with that 200 number. If the question was how many persons who were on TLEPs had applied for permanent residence as part of that group, that'd be a different matter. But that 200 is not entirely a reflection of the TLEPs. In fact, the TLEPs would form a very small percentage of that number. That's simply the number of persons who have applied since the law was amended.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Well, that is even better. Then let's hear which is which, if we can break them down now.
We don't have that breakdown here. We'll see what we can do to get it. But simply by virtue of the number of persons on TLEPs, we know that that number would be very, very small. But we'll see what we can do to do the breakdown. But I just didn't want the impression to be given that this 200 applications are 200 persons who were on TLEPs, because that's certainly not the case.
Mr. Chairman, the Premier says he'll see what he can do. Does that mean it might not be available?
It's available, but it'll take us time to do the analysis. So we will probably go to the vote on this before I'm able to answer your question. But I'll let you have the information as soon as I do.
Okay. Okay, the question is now, Mr. Chairman, why was it, and this probably is for the Premier, they all are for him, why is it that we have such backup? Is it because the board is not working? Because the CIO just said the board is now working on them. Such backlog, that is, of permanent residence applications.
Mr. Chairman, when we took office, there were something like a backlog of 1,000. The board is working through essentially 40 applications a week at present and have made huge progress with respect to that original backlog. I don't know if I can provide, it's not that the board is not working, but each application requires careful consideration, and I think managing 40 per agenda is pretty good going.
pretty good going. Are we done looking at her? Mr. Chairman, if I may, the Premier said that there was 1,000 around there that was there when he took office. What was that announcement recently, a few months ago, that the board had not been appointed? Could that have been the cause of this? Why they're backed up?
Mr. Chairman, that announcement was with respect to the new appointments to the board. We left in place the board that was in operation when we took office. So the Cayman Status and Permanent Residency Board was really the last one that we made the changes to. So the board that was in operation when we took office continued to work with respect to the backlog. As I said, this backlog was there for a long time. So it's not ideal. We certainly aren't where we need to be. We've got 400 pending. That's not a good position to be. But we're doing the best that we can.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Look like he want to answer.
Mr.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not just permanent residence applications that they consider the Caymanian status applications as well.
Well, that was the next question, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering how many Cayman status is also backlog.
My information is there are about 300 pending, applications pending.
Mr. Chairman, through the process of extrapolation, can I say then that there was 1,000 then pending when the Premier took office too?
I don't know what the number was, and the chief doesn't have that information at our fingertips.
Can we, Mr. Chairman, can we find out, please, if they're going
Yes,
to...
we can find out. If it helps the member, we can find out.
Mr. McLean.
What do you mean if it helps the member? Don't you think I asked it for a specific reason, for my own purposes?
Not necessarily, member.
You think I like you or what?
Mr. McLean, Mr. McLaughlin, if I could ask that you please refrain from the schoolyard behavior and let us stick to the matter at hand.
Mr. Chairman, he started the schoolyard behavior, you know.
Mr.
If he
McLean.
dig up sand, I can dig it up too.
Mr. McLean, if your questions are through, I'll turn to Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I wanted the Premier, when you're doing the analysis, if you could indicate what percentage is trending in approvals. Is it 30%, 40%, 70% of the applicants that have been considered? What percentage is being approved when you're doing the numbers for us?
Thank you. So, Mr. McLaughlin, is there an undertaking to provide information as requested from the members?
We'll do the best we can, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any further questions with respect to HCA 4 processing status and permanent residency applications for $128,053? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of HCA 4 processing status and permanent residency applications for $128,053, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. HCA 5 Immigration Entry and Extension Services, $3,610,605. Are there any questions with respect to this appropriation?
Mr.
Miller?
Chairman, I don't have a question, but just in the interest of this transparency, because the public listened to this, for instance, the one that we just finished, all the public is hearing is the cost of $128,000. But if you look at the note below, it says the cost of supplying this output is $1,000,000 $25,748. And so I think that the public may be getting the wrong impression as to what this service is costing if we only read the 128. We know because we can see the note, but the public don't have access to that note, and I think it's very important that the true cost of this is known to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Carter Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for a point of clarification, on page 59, under description, provide required entry and embarkation controls for all passengers, persons seeking permission to enter, depart the Cayman Islands. Some time ago, I made observation while I was waiting on Cayman Airways that there was a private plane on the airstrip of Cayman Brac, and there were two personnel that disembarked that had on what I would describe as army attire, and a gentleman with a business attire. When I made inquiry to the last governor, I was amazed to find out that nobody seemed to know what they were doing in Cayman Brac, and that in fact that aircraft had made some 13 appearances on the Brac and was assured that proper procedure would be put in place, that they were cleared and or registered in Grand Cayman. I'm not sure whether it be the Premier or whoever he would ask, give some level of guarantee that this has been tightened up and that there would not be a recurrence like that on the Brac or Little Cayman, or in fact Grand Cayman again.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly.
I suppose I don't know if I can give an undertaking, because in Cayman Brac, immigration and immigration controls fall under the district commissioner. They're not controlled by the chief immigration officer here.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Connolly, was there a follow-up question, or is that?
I'll have Mr. Chair to ask it then under district admin, but it's a deep concern, seeing that we don't have a high level of patrol around the islands, that you could have an aircraft come in so many different times with that type of personnel and nobody seemed to have known. I was given assurance that it would not reoccur again. I just want to make sure that those reassurances are being carried out. And I asked it here because it was like internal, external affairs, and it could have been a high-level exercise. I don't know. I just want to make sure that we're covered.
Thank you. Thank you. Further to what Mr. Miller said earlier, I do agree that even though these documents are publicly available for anyone listening on the radio or even watching on the television, they will not have before them the information that we have before us. So with respect to the output that we just approved, HCA 4, the note says on page 58 of the annual plan and estimates that the total cost of supplying this output is $1,025,744. However, estimated entity revenue of $886,450 reduces the cost to cabinet to $128,053. Hence, that is the amount of money being appropriated in that particular output. And the current output in this under discussion at the moment, HCA 5, the note also says the total cost of supplying this output group is $4,413,605. However, the revenue of $803,000 from the other third party reduces the cost to cabinet to $3,610,605. Hence, that is the amount that's being appropriated. So are there any further questions with respect to HCA 5? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Chief Immigration Officer. For some time, there's been discussions about biometric identity being introduced at immigration in the airport. And if I recall, the equipment has been bought for some 5 or 6 years. Is there any plans to put biometrics at the airport for passengers?
Ms. Evans?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, from 2011, the equipment was brought. All staff were trained on fingerprinting equipment. It just required a change, an amendment in the law, which unfortunately did not occur. It is currently with the ministry to present to Cabinet again to forward the amendment to the House to allow for not just fingerprinting, but not just your fingerprints, but your palm prints as well, which is what the equipment that we thought best to install.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you. Second question. There's also been discussion for years of transferring the responsibility of collecting outgoing immigration cards to the airlines. And I notice now that even our neighbor to Jamaica has gotten rid of outgoing immigration. Is there any plans in the near future to eliminate outgoing immigration as a cost savings or to be able to provide better service on entry?
We have introduced advanced passenger systems, and we've had a pilot since August of last year. All airlines have reconfigured their databases to allow us to have electronic manifests, and with the exception of Cayman Airways and one other airline, I believe. So basically, all airlines are able to pass through outgoing immigration without any interfacing with an immigration officer, with the exception of Cayman Airways, which we are working diligently to try to resolve those issues.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, is there Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. I'll try to get a commitment from the Minister of Cayman Areas when that comes around to use some of the 23.5 million subsidy this year to make sure that they adjust their computers.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, I thank you. Mr. Chairman, some time ago, we changed the law, was it, or the regulation to allow local fishermen to go to the banks. Did we amend the law to do that? I think. But we had to put the system in place. And I kept following up on it, but I dropped the ball, really. I didn't follow up anymore, but I haven't heard anything about it.
The portion relating to immigration was amended in the immigration law. However, for this to work properly, it does require the cooperation with customs, which is also a part of the fishermen having to leave the jurisdiction, which we're currently working with the new collective customs to resolve that portion of the.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if I can get a time frame that we expect this to be completed, because this has been about 2 years, 3 years now, around that. Close to 3 years.
Our portion is complete, sir. Like I said, it's really reliant on customs for it to work properly, which is the Minister of Finance responsibility.
Okay, when he come up on this, no, he won't get on the stand, but he'll send somebody with his proxy. We'll deal with them then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Are there any further questions with respect to output HCA5? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor? My apologies, Mr. Connolly. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to determine the applications in the first section, which CA5, in that definition, do work permits fall under applications? The last line in the first section. Number of applications processed. The 1600 to 1850.
that number relates to visitors extensions, sir.
Visitors extensions. Okay, where would, okay, so HCA 6 would be work permits.
Okay. Any further questions on that appropriation? If there are no further questions with respect to HCA 5, then all those in favor of HCA 5, Immigration Entry and Extension Services for $3,610,605, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. And those against, no. HCA 6, Entry Documents and Passports for $2,259,669, found on page 60 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions with respect to this output? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Premier can give us an update on the new way forward. Is it January 1st? With the Caymanian passports. Well, those we issue anyway.
While they're conferring with respect to that question, I would just like to announce that we will be breaking for lunch at 12:45 p.m. and we will resume proceedings at 2 p.m. So 12:45 and resume, break at 12:45 and resume at 2 p.m. Ms. Evans or Mr. Bush, who's going to answer the question? Ms. Evans?
The repatriation of processing BOTC passports is, yes, it is. The repatriation of BOTC passports is scheduled for January of 2015 for all of the territories with the exception of Cayman, who has opted to not be in the contingency plan, which is to send the physical documents to UK, but to use our current stock instead, and then we will start the process of repatriating fully in May of 2015.
Do we, Mr. Chairman, if through you, sir, do we have an idea of how long that repatriation process is going to take?
There are weekly discussions on this whole project, basically. They've said May 15, and even that date, we are not certain that that would actually materialize. It does require a lot of other details to be worked out in terms of emergency passports for jurisdictions that will require, for instance, for medical reasons, to be able to issue their nationals. So there is a lot of work to be done in terms of having a final date when we will actually start. But they've given us May 15 as a target. May 2015 as the target month and year.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the lady for that, but I believe she may have misunderstood. Maybe I didn't explain it well enough. I'm talking about when it starts. How long has there been any discussion surrounding how long is going to take one to get that passport?
We have no indication of how long it will take. Our effort is to try to do so electronically, whereby we are able to give them the details of what would be contained in the passport electronically to hopefully expedite the process for Cayman. That would be at substantial cost to reconfiguring our current database. But in terms of timeline and them returning the passports to us, they have not confirmed how long process that would be.
Mr. Chairman, I know England has been horrendous in their abilities to process passports, even for their own people. It has been years they have messed it up. Right now, the British passport is taking 3-4 months to come back. And besides, this is the area I want to touch on, we now have to send our Cayman passport along with it. Are there, I see the quizzical look on the Premier face, are there any discussions with them to avoid us having to send our Cayman passport? Because your emergency stock might run out quite quickly when people wanting to travel or emergency travel during that period. And, I don't see the need to send a Cayman passport when it can be authenticated by the passport office, a copy of it.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Mr. Chairman, the length of time it takes to get a British passport remains an abiding concern. It's 10 to 12 weeks usually, and sometimes it can be longer. And so we have concerns on that end, but we also have concerns if that is going to be the length of time that it takes to get a Cayman passport once the system goes into place. So we have made representations about this. It's a matter that I'm putting on the agenda for the Joint Ministerial Council meeting when we meet again to discuss it. But with respect to the last part of the question, through the Governor's Office, we have made representations to the UK Passport Office, seeking to get them to agree to accept facsimiles of the Cayman Islands passport when that is sent along as part of the application process for a British passport, so that you wouldn't have to send, if they will agree with our proposal, you wouldn't have to send the actual Cayman passport.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, following up on that, has there been any discussions for applications, whether it's Cayman passport or the British passport, to go through, be screened here and go through the immigration department and forwarded to England in the diplomatic pouch?
Mr. Chairman, we try to avoid that. That's going to take longer. Yes. Our proposal is that we send the information via secure email.
Mr. Chairman, even that, but that is for all passports, British and Cayman passports?
No, that would be only with respect to the Cayman Islands passport. The British passport will have to be processed through their system.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. But when you're applying for the British passport, you have other documentation that is required to support that application, i.e. the Cayman passport. That is particular what the area that I think we need to hone in on, because if Caymanians have to send their passport away to get the British passport that they have bequeathed upon us, I don't know how are we going to travel. That's where we need somehow, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just repeat what I said earlier, is that the Governor's Office, at our request, has made representations to the UK Passport Office, and we are seeking to persuade them to accept a facsimile of the Cayman Islands passport instead of the actual document itself as part of the documents that are required when you apply for a British passport.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, in all the discussions, Mr. Premier, has there ever been any suggestion that the time might come when the British government might say that You either have a Cayman passport or a British passport, but you can't have both.
No, sir. The concept of a British overseas territory or of British overseas territorial citizenship is still very much a part of the British Nationality Act.
Are there any further questions with respect to output H, CA6? Mr. Connolly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll ask my question that I thought was going to be for CA5 now. And this is to the Chief Immigration Officer through you. What tools do the boards use in determining the grant or denial of a work permit right now? I mean, what information makes up that decision-making process?
The application process requires key documentation such as your police clearance, medical, and basically what's contained in the application in reference to the particulars of the individual as well as the employer's requirements. They also have access to, obviously, our database to see if there's any history relating to either the employer or the prospective employee, as well as a physical file which may contain information relating to that individual.
But in terms of, and it came from a question that Mr. McLean asked earlier, or maybe it was Mr. Miller, cross-governmental information, police records, NWDA reports, how much of that type of information is A, obtained, and B, used to make up that decision?
Yes, we currently have an interface with NWDA currently where we can log on and see who has registered with them in terms of prospective employee, as well as the company having registered that they have a vacancy. And basically the NWDA would then facilitate referring any unemployed persons who they've deemed to be suitable. And they will also have the employer record the reasons for why they were not hired. And the board and the administrators will review those suggestions and make a decision on whether to grant or defer an application for further information.
Okay, and the police clearance, et cetera, too. Do you do that with people that may have done something immoral, illegal?
We will have in our database any recorded convictions of persons on island. So that is a normal step in the process where you're vetting the system to see if there's any concerns relating to that individual. As the chief officer would have mentioned, there is a project in play to have, for immigration to have the ability to just know that there is no conviction recorded against the individual, as opposed to having the applicant go directly to the police station and collect a certificate and then come to immigration. Basically, all we want to know is there a conviction?
That's encouraging to hear. Mr. Chairman, just one follow-up question to that. As a result of the new immigration law changes, can you say how much or how many work permit applications are now being handled by the boards versus the administrators? I'm just trying to determine who gets to decide, or the proportionality of who decides who is a successful candidate or otherwise, via the board or the.
Temporary work permits are dealt solely by the administrator. It's a responsibility of the Chief Immigration Officer. Work permit grants, renewals, and amendments are determined on a first-come, first-served basis unless there's a genuine need to expedite an application. And it is flowed from that. So basically, if your application is next in line, it'll go to the next available decision maker, whether that be the board or an administrator.
But so there's no other trigger, like, it has to be a certain level of person or meaning managerial and up. That's what I'm trying to decide. But I think you've answered my question in terms of it's just basically the next available decision maker.
With the amendment in the law in October, the administrators are able to deal with all applications. Before, we were limited in the types of decisions we could make, but that has been removed with the exception of being able to grant a business staffing plan ourselves.
Yeah,
So,
but you don't know the proportion then statistically how many have been granted by the administrators versus how many have been granted by the board.
our target for each administrator, and we currently have 11, five are in training, and our target for each administrator is 60 per week. And that is being met for the most part.
That's processed though, not
Yeah, yeah.
not granted.
No, that's processed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Conley went on this thing about boards and how they grant whatever, I wonder if the CIO can tell us if they still require financial position of the individual to grant status, to prove that they are not bankrupt or insolvent.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the application for status has been amended to enhance the requirement in law to elaborate basically whether the person has been bankrupt or otherwise insolvent. So no, there is no requirement currently to have a bank reference, as you alluded to.
But
That is a change in policy of the PR and CS board.
thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, for my own understanding, with respect to work permits, do we only require our status grants or PR grants? Do we only require a police record, or do we seek are there other ways of determining whether this person is of good and fit character for such an award?
We rely primarily on an original police clearance. We do have the ability to work with other agencies outside the jurisdiction if the need arises for us to have more in-depth information in relation to an individual, which we regularly do.
Do we use databases such as WorldCheck?
We have
or-
WorldCheck for specific applications. We don't have the licenses for the number of licenses to deal with work permit related.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions with respect to output HCA 6? Mr. Conley?
Just one quick one. I'm looking at last year's AP&E, and the amount that we had budgeted for this was $2,425,598, and we are now forecasting to June 30th 1,969,885. Does that mean that we're under budget from last year's figures? Oh, sorry, did I did it the wrong way? Sorry. Yeah, sorry, the other way around.
Would you like to rephrase the question, or you've clarified it now?
I think I've clarified it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And for the listening public, I will once again read the note. The total cost of supplying this output group is $5,213,112. However, projected revenue of $2,953,443 from other third parties reduces the cost to Cabinet to $2,259,669. Ms. Rivers, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just have a question with respect to the work permit applications, and in terms of, did you say that there was there's a health-related aspect to the information that need to be provided, and if so, does that include or involve drug testing of any
No,
form?
there's a requirement in law to ensure that the person is healthy. The medical questionnaire does not does not require a test for drugs.
Ms. Rivers, is there a follow-up question, or you're satisfied? Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions with respect to this appropriation, then all those in favor of HCA 6, entry documents and passports for $2,259,669, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. I'm going to jump now to appropriation NGS 38, found on page 86 of your annual plan and estimates. Yeah. It is 12:45, but in the interest of making,
Press on.
yeah, I just want to complete this one output NGS 38
If you're hungry, might get
with respect to refugee services, because that's the last question, that's the last output that relates to the immigration department, and therefore Ms. Evans would then be able to return to her normal duties. So just to enable her to leave if necessary. So page 86 of the annual plan and estimates, NGS 38, services for refugees for $270,000. Are there any questions with respect to this appropriation? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering if $270,000 is sufficient to keep all the refugees that we are keeping at the Fairbanks.
Mr. McLean, is that the question?
Yes, the funds.
Okay. Well, given the note below, it says, due to the nature of this output group, services will be contracted on an as-needed basis. It is an unpredictable, an unknown variable, so to speak.
I understand that, sir. However, the deputy governor not here today said to me that they expect plenty more. I don't really get the information from, must be the Commissioner of Police investigating it, but he said they expecting more.
Mr. McLean, is there anyone able to answer that question or any information? Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In an attempt to answer the question, this is a budgetary figure. I can say this year, which we've seen an increase in the number of migrants that have come onto our shores, we've spent over $500,000 in this financial year. It is a very unpredictable output in itself, as we try to state right there. The $270,000 is there, and it is based, will be affected by a number of variables. The amount of migrants we receive, how many we have to detain at one time, how quickly Cuba will allow us to repatriate them, which we're trying to speed up. So I'm hoping that we will be able to stay within this figure, whether by Cuba receiving them quicker or us not receiving any.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, sir.
Yes, sir.
I would draw the chief officer's attention to the third line on this page. The left margin says measures, and coming across it says 2014-15 budget, 2014-14 forecast. Forecast. That is the operative word. Is the chief officer telling us that this 270 that he has represented here was put there when he knew that this $500,000 has been spent and sent to this parliament? Oh, yeah?
I agree with you. Because the forecast for 13-14, we have housed a lot more than up to 25 migrants on any one time. So that in itself is incorrect, as well as the cost, the forecast of expenditure. That is correct, sir. Through you, Mr. Chair.
I did have a question from Mr. Eden first, and then Mr. McTaggart.
Mine was just an observation. That what is there for the 2013-14 forecast is actually the amount that was approved last year. 270 is the budget, so it doesn't appear that it was updated.
Mr. Eden, did you have a...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to maybe the Premier or the Chief Officer, and this may not be the area, but I will still bring it up. When are we going to consider, and I know that it has been indicated that we will, a change in policy, because the amount of money that is being drained out of this country, can we not look and renegotiate or whatever? Because my understanding is, I see what happened over in the back where they try to just give these people food. They don't want to stay here. They want to go on somewhere else. We must, at some stage here now, make a decision to whatever, and I know whatever it is out there with human rights and so on and so forth, to look at renegotiating and let's face it, give them a little bit of food and send them on where they want to go. Why do we have to be saddled with this enormous amount of money every time you turn around?
Mr. Chairman, I really wish it were as simple as simply giving them something and letting them go. There are three major concerns. The first is the responsibility we assume for them if we assist them in continuing a journey in a craft which is unseaworthy and they meet with disaster. The second is the relationship with the United States. If we are perceived as assisting Cuban migrants to reach their shores. And the third is the relationship with the Cuban government if we are perceived as assisting persons to leave Cuba. And I said three, but there's probably a fourth one. If Cayman becomes perceived as a place that is assisting with the migration of Cubans, there are going to be huge numbers that arrive here, and very quickly we will find that our own people who now, many of them lobby to help them, are going to say, well, how much is too much? And it will then become the burden of the Cayman Islands government to provide whatever it is that we're providing to assist in their migration. What we do need to do, though, is to renegotiate this agreement, or to get the Cuban government to actually act in accordance with the memorandum that we do have, so that we don't wind up having them here for extended periods of time, which is what is occurring now. And to that end, we had hoped to actually go to Cuba this month. But because of a number of things on this end and on the Cuban end, that's not going to be possible. So the meeting has now been scheduled for sometime in September, when we hope to get to a better arrangement than is currently the case.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLean, I recognize and I do agree with you that there is what appears to be, and I don't think it's an attempt on the part of anyone to mislead. I think there was an oversight. On page 346 of the annual plan and estimates, on the note 27, page 346, of the annual planning estimates on the note 27, output from non-governmental suppliers. If you look down the page, about a third of the way down the page, NGS 38, services for refugees. You will see there in the second column that the forecast for 13-14 is 465,000, which is rounded up, would be somewhat approximately 500,000 in Mr. Bush's estimation. So despite the fact that it wasn't correct on the face of the appropriation page, it is reflected in the document otherwise within the notes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But in both years, 12, 13, 13, 14, we're right around 500,000. And we bring 270,000 here.
But Mr. McLean, in all fairness, you would understand that it is an unknown variable, and we don't want to budget large numbers when we don't know the true cost. It's much better to budget a lesser number, and if necessary, do a section 11.5, as opposed to a larger number when we are trying desperately to keep the cost down and come within the targets that we are set under the framework for fiscal responsibility and the medium-term fiscal strategy. So we recognize your concern, but at the end of the day, thank you, sir.
I take your word for it. You're the accountant, sir. Mr. Chairman, if I may, the Premier just said that, and one of the very few times I agree with him, we got to be very careful with bilateral agreements. But bilateral agreements are bilateral agreements. It means there are two entities involved. Now, they have breached that, and I'm not supporting us publicly or privately to tit for tat. My question is, why is there a different policy in Cayman Brac than there is in Grand Cayman?
Mr. Chairman, the answer to that is there is not. There is one country, the Cayman Islands, and there's one government, and there's one policy. Whether or not the policy is being adhered to in the same way in different places is another matter.
Mr. Chairman, all of those things that the Premier just spoke about, fear of going to sea and on seaworthy boat and the this and the that, they came on Brac administration giving them food and sending them down here. And that is over 90 miles to come here. So the same dangers they face from going from here to wherever they're going, whether it's America, Honduras, or whatever, it don't take 90 miles from getting that same danger. But why, Mr. Premier, and Mr. Chairman, I get into you, sir, with your question. Why, Mr. Premier, I'm asking this is the immigration and police locking down everybody in East End. And they want to lock down the administration in Cayman Brac. What are we going to do about that? We need to develop a policy that Eastenders can adhere to, because I'm taking the licks from the public who has this feeling that they need to help in the interest of humanity and the Christian faith and the like, but the police want to lock us, not me, the people up, and the immigration want to stop them, and rightly so, because they're breaking the law. I understand that, but Cayman Brac, the administration letting them go and help them with repairs.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Well, Mr. Chairman, all I can say is that we are all bound by the law. Whether it's the governor or myself as premier or immigration officers in Cayman Brac, we are all bound by the law. And we cannot have one set, the member is absolutely right, we cannot have one policy with respect to this for Grand Cayman or East End in particular, he claims, and one for Cayman Brac. There has to be a consistent policy that is consistently administered. Otherwise, the kind of complaints, and worse. As I say, we don't know, quite frankly, how many people, how many Cubans we've set off for their last voyage, and who meet their demise, because those numbers are never known and never disclosed. You know, so it is a matter of concern to us and has not escaped our attention at all. So we're doing our best to deal with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
I thank the Premier for that, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate that, but he must understand that the same way Cayman Brackers want him out of Cayman Brack, we want him out of East End too.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. If there are no further questions with respect to appropriation NGS 38, I'll proceed to the vote. So all those in favor of NGS 38, Services for Refugees, 270,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. This is a convenient time for us to take the lunch break. It is now 1 p.m. We will resume at 2 p.m. These proceedings are now suspended.